From incomplete Olympic rings lighting up in 2014 to live birds getting fried in a big old cauldron, these are the biggest fails of the Olympic opening ceremonies. Let's kick this off with the ring mishap. So let me tell you about this hilarious moment at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. They had this epic plan to transform huge snowflakes into the famous Olympic rings. Exciting stuff, right? Well, here comes the big moment. 4 out of the 5 snowflakes do their thing and open up perfectly. But guess what? The 5th snowflake, representing the Americas, decides to be a rebel and stays all closed up. Everyone watching at home and in the stadium was just stunned because you don't really expect errors of this level to be shown during global events. It was a total surprise and definitely not part of the plan. And you know what's even funnier? This was all broadcast to millions of people around the world. Here's the excuse they gave. Apparently, the super cold weather froze the hydraulic system that was supposed to open the rings. Imagine that even the machinery couldn't handle the chill. But hey, the show must go on, right? So the performers kept doing their thing and the ceremony continued without a hitch. People couldn't help but giggle and share their amusement on social media. It became the Olympic rings fail that everyone talked about, and memes were born. Despite the little hiccup, the Sochi Winter Olympics was still a blast, with tons of awesome performances and a celebration of Russian culture. But let's just say, the snowflake-turned ring that never was stole the spotlight for a while. That wasn't the only mishap that night, though. So here's the scoop. During the same 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, they had this grand plan to make the rings open up, and then bam! Fireworks would light up the sky, making it all extra spectacular. But guess what? The rings had other plans. When the big moment arrived, they decided, we're not gonna burst into fireworks today. So instead of a magnificent display, we got a failed attempt at pyrotechnics. But if you were watching the ceremony on Russian TV, you wouldn't have even known something went wrong. The clever folks at Russia 1, the host broadcaster, quickly switched to rehearsal footage that worked like a charm. They wanted to save the day and keep the Olympic spirit alive. And you know what? It wasn't the first time they did something like this. The Associated Press says they've pre-recorded parts of ceremonies before just to dodge any potential hiccups. Smart move, I've got to admit. So imagine the viewers at home scratching their heads while the folks at the stadium and around the world were left wondering what in the world just happened. It became the talk of the town, or should I say the talk of the Olympic Games. In the end, though, it didn't rain on Sochi's parade. And it looks like these cauldrons have a bad history because they failed one other time. Back in 2000, in a near-disaster situation, the cauldron was actually lit while submerged in water. It was like trying to light a match underwater. Not the best idea. To make matters worse, when they tried to raise the cauldron above the torchbearer, it got stuck. The cauldron just sat there, refusing to budge for what felt like an eternity. But fear not, because a quick-thinking worker came to the rescue. They grabbed a straining bar and gave the cauldron a well-placed hit. And voila! The cauldron was freed from its sticky situation and rose up above the stadium, bringing a collective sigh of relief to everyone involved. Crisis averted. And while that was a tad embarrassing, this next one from Beijing was just rude. Back in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, there was this adorable little girl named Lin Miaoke who stole the show with her lovely singing during the opening ceremony. But here's the twist. She wasn't actually singing at all. It turns out that Lin Miaoke was lip-syncing the song, while another girl with the perfect voice was hidden away. Why? Well, apparently, the decision was made because the true singer was considered too ugly for the spotlight. That's definitely not a nice thing to say about the girl. The musical director of the show defended their choice, claiming they wanted to create the perfect combination of a beautiful performance and a flawless voice. But let's be honest, it's still a bit disappointing to find out that the adorable little star was just mouthing the words. In another unexpected turn of events, though, they actually projected a computer's blue screen of death on the Bird's Nest Stadium during the ceremony. Can you imagine? That's the kind of thing you usually encounter on your own computer when it's having a bad day, not during a grand international event. These moments remind us that even the most carefully planned events can have their share of unexpected surprises. From lip-syncing cuteness to technical hiccups, the 2008 Olympics in Beijing had its fair share of memorable and eyebrow-raising moments. And then there was the weird one, where we had vanishing players. This happened at the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. While the ceremony may have been a bit smaller in scale compared to previous games, it definitely had its share of quirks and surprises. Here's what happened. After the athletes entered the stadium in a grand procession, something unexpected went down. Many of them started leaving right in the middle of the ceremony. You see, there weren't enough volunteers to guide and keep the athletes in the middle of the stadium floor. So as the parade of nations dragged on and on, the poor athletes became bored and tired. It was like a never-ending march. Eventually, around 2,000 athletes out of the original group of over 10,000 decided to call it quits and leave. They probably thought, enough is enough. Let's get some rest. Can you blame them? It's hard to stay engaged and enthusiastic for such a long time, especially when you're eager to represent your country in competition. And sure, that was crazy, but let's talk about how big of a disappointment this next one was back in 2010. They had this grand plan to have 5 Canadian sports legends light the flame, but things didn't quite go as expected. The crowd was eagerly waiting for the big moment, and 3 pillars rise up with Nancy Green, Steve Nash, and hockey legend Wayne Gretzky standing tall, ready to light their torches. It's all going according to plan, right? Well, not exactly. You see, there was one pillar left, waiting for the renowned speed skater Catriona LeMay-Doan to take her rightful place. But guess what? That pillar had a mind of its own and decided to malfunction. So there she was, poor Catriona, standing there with her torch ablaze but with no place to light it. It's like being ready to blow out birthday candles, but the cake disappears. But let me tell you, Catriona handled it like a champ. She didn't let the glitch steal her thunder. Instead, she bravely saluted the crowd, showing her Canadian spirit and keeping that torch burning bright. Sure, it might not have been the flawless finale they had hoped for, but sometimes life throws us unexpected surprises. None of these were as bad as the horrible fried bird incident. So, back then, the opening ceremony was in full swing, and the excitement was in the air. As a symbol of peace, they planned to release a bunch of doves into the sky. How sweet. But here's where things went haywire. When they lit up the Olympic cauldron, instead of making a graceful exit, some of the doves flew straight into the flames. Yikes, that's a bird-brained move. You'd think birds are smart enough to know that fire equals danger and to fly away from it. But nope, not these doves. They decided to go full-on daredevil mode and ended up sacrificing themselves for the Olympic pyre. It's like they mistook the cauldron for some kind of extreme bird Olympics. Sure, a few of the doves managed to escape their fiery fate and flew off to safety, but sadly, most of them just sat there, completely unfazed by the blazing inferno. They ended up turning into crispy critters. It's hard to say why these adventurous avians chose to go down in a blaze of glory. Maybe they wanted to add a touch of drama to the opening ceremony. Or perhaps they just got a bit confused and thought the flames were their new hangout spot. One thing's for sure. It wasn't the best outcome for our feathered friends, and it reminds us that even the most well-intentioned plans can go wrong in the most unexpected and unfortunate ways. Let's hope the doves at future Olympics remember to steer clear of anything that's hotter than a summer day. So, from live birds getting fried in a big old cauldron to incomplete Olympic rings lighting up, those were the biggest fails of the Olympic opening ceremonies.